Hi, everyone. I'm Christina. I'm the Senior VP Revenue here at the News Revenue Hub. It's really nice to see so many familiar names as well as new ones. And before I hand it over to Sam, I just want to give you a little bit of background on our organization. We are a mission-driven nonprofit that helps newsrooms build reliable reader revenue. We started in about 2016, and over the last 5 years, we've helped over 70 newsrooms raise over $65 million from small dollar donors. All of us have been in your shoes before. Many of us have worked in newsrooms. Many of us have also run NewsMatch campaigns. And throughout the year, we provide hands-on consulting support and a donation processing system, which I'll talk about in just a second. Since the launch of NewsMatch, our team has been a key partner in helping you get ready for the campaign and set you up for success to unlock as much money as you can. And we've taken everything we've learned about membership, digital fundraising, and audience development, and we're sharing it all with you here through these webinars. And as Maida said, there's a lot of other materials and recordings on the NewsMatch HQ. You can find a newsletter course where you can sign up and go through this month-long journey of getting a crash course in fundamentals of digital fundraising. You can schedule office hours with our audience development specialists, including Abby, who is here in our chat right now. And we'll also be releasing a campaign toolkit at the end of September that will really help you run the campaign. As I mentioned, we do have a technology component to our work, which is a donation processing system. And Sam, if you go to the next slide, please. This year, we're really excited to launch a standalone version of the system called the News Revenue Engine, and we are making it free to anybody in NewsMatch that needs or wants a streamlined donation page. So in addition to having a strong fundraising strategy, having a good infrastructure to process donations and make it easy for your donors is just as important. This is going to be built off of Stripe, and you'll also get reports that help you measure your campaign progress and report back to the Miami Foundation after the campaign. Our team will be hosting a demo and a webinar on August 17th. So if you're interested in learning more, we'll drop the sign up link. It looks like Maida already did that, dropped it in the chat. And we'll kind of walk you through all the features and help you figure out if this is the right fit for you. No pressure, but we just want to make sure that everybody is set up for success this November. All right, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Sam Muncie. So just take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Maida and Christina, for the great introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about all the ways you can use and expand your evergreen content in the newsroom. This is actually my first time presenting a webinar, so I'm very much a first-time caller, long-time listener in this situation, but lucky for you, I have a lot to say. I have a lot of great tips, tools, examples, and ideas to share around my evergreen content journey, and I would like to just take a moment to thank my colleagues at News Revenue Hub for helping me parse through all of this presentation. So a little bit about me. My name is Samantha, and I'm a project manager here at News Revenue Hub. I help over 70 newsrooms with their membership and audience strategies, and I also serve as a connection between our experts here at the Hub and our news organizations. Before joining the Hub, I worked in local news for almost a decade, serving the community of Tucson and Southern Arizona. I had various roles at the Arizona Daily Star, a longtime legacy newspaper out here, where I spent my time working on audience development and engagement. And I also was a producer for the news/lifestyle startup, This is Tucson, where I got the fun experience of creating content for a specific audience who loved the city just as much as I do. Except for right now, because it is very hot, but we have cactus, so it's okay. Throughout my time here, I've used evergreen content to help me with my audience strategies and learned that when used correctly, evergreen can really tell you a lot about your readers and what they find value in. So this is just a look at our agenda today. A reminder that you will be sent these slides after our presentation, so don't feel like you have to soak this all in right now. For today's discussion, we're going to start off just chatting in general about what evergreen content looks like, and then get more specific as we move along to think about ways you can maintain, measure, and create evergreen content for your newsrooms. At the end, I'll have a few takeaways/homework. I know how some people feel about homework, but I promise it's beneficial, as a way to just consider a plan for your fall 2022. And because I come from a long line of educators, I would be amiss not to present you with a learning target for you all today. My aunts would be very proud and thankful that I'm bringing this up to you right now because it means that I listen. This is just an objective to show you that by the end of this discussion, you'll be able to maximize and grow your evergreen content strategies. So I think we've waited long enough. Let's dive into it. So what is evergreen content? To put it as simple as possible, evergreen content is anything you produce that will remain helpful and accurate long after you hit the publish button. It's something your readers can discover and return to no matter the time of year. There are some cases throughout a time period where your evergreen content might shine brighter compared to previous months, and we'll get into defining what those examples are in the following slides. There are many forms of media to consider when we think about evergreen, but today we're going to chat about content that we typically find in news, which is articles, photos, videos, interactives, but please don't limit yourself to those ideas. So when we look up information about evergreen content, some of the first examples you'll see revolve around how evergreen works for marketing, which truly is creating content that can pretty much stand the test of time. But when we think about evergreen content in the newsroom, I believe that there is some room for flexibility regarding when evergreen is and isn't effective for a specific time frame. Because of this, I like to think about evergreen content into two different categories. The first is what I like to call year-round appeal. This is content that generally lends itself to good traffic and searchability no matter the time of year. Explainers, how-to guides, profiles, commentary, and historical information are all really good examples of content that remains highly relevant for an extended period of time. The reason for that is that the interest level of these topics never fade. If you're interested in learning more about long-standing evergreen content, I recommend checking out the New York Times article on the 100 evergreen stories. It's actually designed for schools to help you with writing, but I think it's a really great example where you can pull some examples and get an understanding of what year-round evergreen appeal content looks like. I'll link it in the slides so you can get a chance to look at it after the presentation. Another example I have here is actually a story from El Paso Matters. This was published this July about a notable citizenship case from the 1910s that remains relevant today because it helped establish birthright citizenship for children of immigrants. This story can be published at any time and will always make an impact on readers. The next category is what I like to call seasonal performers. This is evergreen content that, while helpful year-round, really gains a lot of momentum with audiences during a particular time of year. There can be several reasons for that, but often this kind of content is connected to things like expected events, like elections. I have an example here of a handy voter guide Cal Matters produced this year that will remain relevant for the entire election season and can be added to their election coverage. You can also think about season performers as things we often plan for during a specific time of year, like filing taxes or even seasonal habits like having a hankering for soup in the winter and wanting to find the best recipe for chicken noodle. Seasonal performers can be identified by providing context to what is currently happening in the news, but still has some long-term quality to them. I also have an example here from the Washington Post. It's an interactive they put together about what extreme heat does to the body, and they used this content with some current stories they've been producing about the heat waves we've been experiencing this past summer. So we've talked a little bit about what evergreen content is, and we should really take a second to really chat about what it isn't. Content you produce that is only impactful and useful for a small window of time is not considered evergreen content. This often includes things like event coverage, breaking news, and pretty much anything that you know as soon as you hit the publish button has an expiration date in terms of relevancy. A quick way to determine if something is evergreen or not is just to take a look at the content's traffic. If you see a significant spike in traffic from the initial posting, followed by a quick decline, this is usually a good indicator that this is just a general story and not evergreen. So why is it important to care about evergreen? If you're familiar with the hub, you're probably very familiar with this graphic here that we often referred to as the funnel, which really depicts a reader's journey from being a casual reader to someone who really finds value in what you do and wants to contribute. Evergreen content is great because it reaches readers at every funnel level, whether they are discovering you for the first time through search or want to know more about what you do by interacting with what's available on your site and newsletters. Evergreen content can help you provide information that's always relevant, and this is really great when you're trying to cultivate loyalty. Also, once you develop a good workflow with evergreen content, it can really help fill in those scheduling gaps with information you know that really impacts readers. So now that we know a little bit about what evergreen content is and why it's helpful, let's take some time to think about how we can apply some of what we know to your newsroom. And the best part is you don't have to go far to search for this because evergreen content already exists for you. You already have evergreen content. This information is on your site right now and lends itself to longevity and relevancy for years to come. So before we go out and create evergreen content, we really should utilize what we have. And the way I really like to think about it is just checking the fridge before you go shopping. So how do we identify those pieces of evergreen content? One of the best ways to determine whether something is evergreen or not is to review analytics. One of my favorite and easiest ways to do this is just to go to Google Analytics or whatever tracking tool you prefer and view the top stories from the past year and check to see how well they've performed over an extended period of time. This is kind of what I've done here with these graphs that you'll see in the slide. The top graph shows a story that was published by a San Antonio report in November 2020 that explains the history behind the Alamo. The chart at the bottom shows a story that ran the same time about an election results protest. You'll see that the story about the Alamo had a slow start. Still, it gradually gained momentum over time because the topic of wanting to know about the Alamo will always remain relevant. This is a good indicator of what an evergreen story can look like. However, the story at the bottom, while impactful when it was published, was only valuable to readers for a small window of time. Parsley is also another really great tool to use when determining these indicators. They have an evergreen overview report that's really helpful in identifying evergreen content by comparing it to your recently published content. I'll make sure to include a link on how to set up this report for anybody out there who uses Parsley. Another really great way to kind of indicate where your evergreen content is utilizing Google Search Console, which is a tool you can use to analyze your Google search traffic. This is a great place you can go to and look at top performing stories and queries that are driving people to your site. You'll find that top performing stories over an extended period of time tend to be evergreen content. As with this story example here from This is Tucson, about a nearby mountain destination that local and visitors often search for when finding things to do in this area. When looking for terms that lend itself to evergreen content, it's helpful to think about places in terms like things to do, what is, how do I, where is, are all really great indicators of search queries that really direct themselves to evergreen content that you already have. And finally, one way to identify evergreen content is just by asking yourself, how long is this information going to be relevant and accurate? If the answer is longer than your typical piece of news content, then you probably have an evergreen story. Also, reporters and editors are an excellent resource when it comes to indicating what stories are evergreen or not, as they can flag content as they know what's ahead. Now that we've discussed what evergreen content is and how to identify it, let's chat a little bit about what we can do to maximize the potential of the evergreen you already have. As I mentioned before, evergreen content is an excellent way to grow traffic at any level of the funnel. However, it really lends itself to being searchable and drawing in new users. So you really want to make the most out of your SEO capabilities by optimizing your evergreen content for search as much as possible. One way to do this is just to tap into your search brain and think about terms your readers would search for. really leveraging what you can control with SEO, including writing rich and informational headlines and subheadlines, and providing keywords to your URLs are good ways to increase your reach. This example from Oaklandside is where they did just that. The team utilized SEO to help highlight key search terms for anyone who wanted to know more information about the 1991 Oakland-Berkeley fire, making their audio storytelling easy to find for users. Another way to make the most out of your evergreen content is just by making sure it's easy to find. Taking advantage of your content management system's tags and sections can help you keep track of what you have and make it easy to republish and reuse it in the future. And if you want to go a step further, you can track your evergreen content by using spreadsheets and getting your whole newsroom involved. Source has an excellent article about how a New Orleans newspaper developed a spreadsheet system to keep track of their evergreen content and how it led to page views and increased users over the past 2 years. Now let's talk a little bit about republishing, since I kind of mentioned that in some previous slides. So while some evergreen will not lend itself to being republished just because it continually remains relevant, some pieces of evergreen content can really benefit from being republished, especially if it's a seasonal performer or can provide some depth to what is currently out in the news. An example here is this is Tucson piece where people out here in Tucson will use styrofoam cups to help protect their cactuses from frost. While this information is helpful year-round, republishing this content during the winter can really bring the story back to mind. Additionally, you don't have to republish something or repost the content. Additionally, you don't have to republish something in order to repost the content on your social platforms. This can be really helpful in bringing life and traffic to your content without adjusting the publication date. This example here from the Atlantic, where they posted an article from 2017, is a great example of that. And they often use their social platform to highlight work that they've created in the past without adjusting their publication date. All right, so I really feel like I'm burying the lead here. So I just want to let you know, if there's any takeaways you should have today in terms of starting your evergreen journey, it is to include your evergreen content into the stories you're already publishing. Let me tell you why. Once you identify your evergreen content, it's pretty easy to include these stories in what you're already producing and help increase your recirculation and time with readers. This is where we get into some of the middle funnel work. I will caution you to be mindful about what you want to include. Make sure the content you're attaching to news stories is as relevant as possible. Like this example from the New York Times that uses evergreen content to provide more context behind New York's recent heat wave, including what to do and how to stay safe during a heat wave. Okay, so we know what evergreen content is and how to identify it and how to utilize it. We now really let's think about ways that we can create evergreen content. So, in other words, we've checked the fridge and now we're really ready to shop. So, as you know, newsletters can be really beneficial in developing loyalty. So it only makes sense to try and pair them with evergreen content that we know resonates with readers. During my time at the SIS Tucson, I helped curate an evergreen newsletter course aimed at people who were new to town called How to Tucson. This course contains information about what to do in Tucson, where to eat, and how to live in the desert. This course was developed by taking a look at some of our top performing evergreen stories and creating a product that no matter what time of year you signed up for the newsletter, you would always find the information to be valuable. I'll include a link to the case study in this presentation, so please feel free to check it out after the session. Another example is actually one from one of my favorite newsletters ever. It's the New York Times 5 Weeknights Dishes newsletter. This newsletter is just a collection of recipes from the New York Times that they've developed over the years, and an editor goes through and curates a couple of recipes to highlight. I really like how low lift this is in terms of just taking something that's already there and creating something that's helpful for the reader. It makes you think about what content you could easily curate and highlight with the newsletter. Another way to think about evergreen content is by developing longstanding guides that can be utilized to add more information to your news coverage. So we've already touched base a little bit about how guides are really great examples of what you can do to create evergreen product that can be utilized when covering a particular topic that you know will take several months to dive into and explain. Again, I really have to give a shout out to Cal Matters for creating an election guide that has a lot of evergreen qualities to it, including this voting FAQ section and bios about the candidates that readers can refer to before the election. I also think this guide created by Montana Free Press is a good example of evergreen guides that highlights Montana's fire season and contains important safety information you'll want to know about this time of year. When creating a guide, one of the main things you need to think about is how this information is going to solve a problem for your reader and why it's important to do so. Also, guides, while they typically tend to be rewarding, are also a heavy lift. So please keep that in mind as you're thinking about ways to expand your evergreen horizons. You can also adapt evergreen content for social and change it into something completely new. Reshaping some of your evergreen to fit social platforms is another way to expand upon the work you already have and share it with a new audience. This example from the Los Angeles Times shows how they took an interactive map about the works of art you can see around LA County and adjusted the story on Instagram to highlight some specific art pieces. They then used a link tree to drive users back to the LA Times website to this article, completing the evergreen circle of life. So now we're getting more into the nice to have territory when becoming evergreen experts. So creating sections is an excellent way to define your evergreen content and make it easy for readers to discover more of what you do. This isn't a necessity, but when done effectively, creating a section provides traffic in both article and SEO page data. So it's very much kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. The San Antonio Report recently launched a section called Where I Live that highlights various neighborhoods around San Antonio. This is an excellent example of utilizing sections and evergreen content together, making it easy for the reader to find more information about a particular topic. And lastly, creating content around answers that your readers has is a really great way to develop evergreen as well. And please make sure to utilize your SEO when it comes to creating evergreen content like this. The Texas Tribune recently published a story about what you need to know about the new 988 mental health crisis hotline and included questions that are often searched, making this a long-standing resource for people who need it. Okay, so at this point of the presentation is where I throw it over to you. We've learned a lot today about evergreen content, what it is, how to measure it, how to manage it, how to maximize it, and how to create more of it. So now let's think about ways we can bring this all together to do some cooking for your fall 2022. I know that there are a couple of things on the horizon, including elections and thinking about end of year. So this is a great time to just kind of reflect and talk about all those things. So with that, I just have a few takeaways and homework ideas for you to think about as you're getting ready for what's ahead. And I'm calling this your Evergreen 3 for 3. I would really like for you, either during our session or even later, to think about 3 evergreens you would like to republish this upcoming season, whether that's republishing a helpful story, reposting something on social, or adding some evergreen content to recent stories. Please don't limit yourself to this. And then also thinking about 3 evergreens that you would like to produce. Would you like to create an election guide? How about publishing a story that provides more content to a topic you're already covering? What questions can you help answer for readers? These are all really good starting points when we start to think about a plan in developing new evergreen content. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the questions, and please feel free to chime in with your ideas, and you can always email me too at the email address provided in the slide if you have any additional questions or ideas that you want to chat about after the session. So before we break into questions, I just want to let you know that our next webinar with News Revenue Hub will be August 24th, and we'll cover how to maximize the 2022 election for your audience and membership goals with Abby Gingras. In addition, we'll be offering small group sessions to discuss securing local matches. Sign up for those will be released next week, but if you're already interested, please feel free to send an email at hello@newsmatch.org, as space is limited. So with that, do we have any questions?
And if you have any questions also, or comments or examples of evergreen content that you think resonates with your audience, feel free to raise your hand as well, and we can get you unmuted.
Yes, I know we breezed through a lot of it, but you are certainly free to email me with any sort of evergreen content ideas or strategies that you have. If you don't have a particular question now, but maybe would like to get some feedback in the future, I am definitely here to answer any questions that you have.
Sam, we have a question in the chat from Trish at the Fort Worth Report. She says, this is Tucson was available, the How to Tucson newsletter was available as an email course, right? How did you promote that? And how many conversions did you see to your regular newsletter?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The way that we actually promoted the How to Tucson newsletter was actually just through like traditional email acquisition on our website. So we included newsletter signups on sections that we knew were very relevant to people who were new to Tucson, as they often looked at sections about things to do, entertainment, food, stuff that you kind of think about when you think about cursory information when you're starting to get to know a town. And in terms of conversion, I would have to check to see what that was, but we do have some information about conversion from the newsletter to our longstanding newsletter called the This is Tucson Weekend Planner. It's a weekly newsletter that gets released every Wednesday, highlighting like all the things to do that weekend. And there is some conversion information in the Hub case study. So you can take a look there, and I can also check and send you some notes as well.
Yeah, Maida is actually going to drop a link to the case study. And if you scroll down to the bottom, Trish, there are some KPIs on newsletter growth, even member conversion. And once again, because we're here to talk about setting you up for success for the campaign, it's all about moving people down that loyalty pipeline and getting them primed for fundraising.
Great. And it looks like Leslie also has a question and is just letting us know that they're going to put some thought into some topics. Yeah, and please discuss. Please email me. I really love to hear like what people are looking at and looking to produce. And my colleague Abby will be presenting, as we had mentioned before, an election strategy presentation next month, and you can really kind of expand upon your election evergreen content like there as well, kind of thinking about some additional ideas or things you can do to just prepare in general for the election can also be ways that we can view evergreen. Who typically, oh, this is from Hannah. Hi, Hannah. Who typically owns the process of creating a newsletter course? Membership or editorial teams? So that is a really good question. The way that our newsletter course came about was actually first through audience development. So wanting to create a longstanding newsletter product that we could use to serve new members of Tucson. And then we kind of did a approach where we then reached out to the editorial staff and started to think about ideas of how we wanted to create a course. So my former coworker, Johanna Willett, was actually the person who put together the original course information, and we went through it together as a team to make sure that it was hitting a lot of the evergreen notes that we were looking for. And then the wonderful illustrator / designer at the Arizona Daily Star, Chiara Bautista, please check her out. Her work is amazing. Kind of came in as well and provided a lot of illustration and explainers that kind of really helped elevate that product as well.
I also just want to chime in and say, if you're creating a new product, I think the most important thing is to figure out what the goal of the product is. Maybe it is to just simply grow your newsletter or start rolling out a new editorial product, or if you have releasing a new beat, or you want to do special coverage for 1 or 2 months if you're in election season, for example. If a longer term goal is about membership, definitely have a collaborative process. And I know, you may have one person wearing multiple hats, but if you can get buy-in from multiple elements of the newsroom, I think that all ensures that you're going to have a really strong product that meets all the different goals that you set out to achieve.
Yeah, very much to like what Christina said as well, like really kind of determining like what the need that you're trying to fill with your audience is really important, especially as like evergreen products tend to be more of a larger lift because you're intending them to stay relevant for as long as you possibly can. So, taking some time to really think about initially, who they're serving and why, and how this can be really, really valuable information in the long run are all things to really kind of consider in the beginning process before maybe even thinking about what medium you want to use in terms of developing the evergreen product as well.
Great. Sam, we also had another question come in from Luann at Cardinal News. So when you republish or repost your evergreen content, do you disclose when it was initially published?
Yes. I don't even want to say it really depends. When I'm reposting stuff, I really want to make sure that I'm being as transparent as I possibly can with the reader. So, typically if I have some evergreen content that, was maybe written last year, but is still relevant now, like, again, cactuses in Tucson will always be wearing styrofoam hats in the wintertime. It's okay to kind of republish that story and just leave a note somewhere of when the content was originally published. The other thing you kind of want to think about as well, depending on where you're tracking your search traffic, is how that modifies the URL. So that's something to be mindful about as well. Typically just like changing the headline and republishing doesn't really affect it, but I would definitely check your content management system and how your sections are arranged before testing that if you were trying to track evergreen content for a long period of time. These are really great questions. Thank you all. Again, this is my first webinar, so I really appreciate everybody having a lot of thoughtful questions. And again, please feel free to reach out if you ever want to track strategy or developing anything.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sam. And if there are no additional questions, we'll give you all a few minutes of your day back. This webinar will be available via recording probably tomorrow or Friday on support.newsmatch.org. So if you want to share it with your team, feel free to send them there and they can find that. We invite you to join us on August 24th for our next session with News Revenue Hub. There will also be a session on August 17th about News Revenue Engine, which that link is in the chat. So we hope to see you there. And with that, have a great day and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns.